Today at the National Press Club, Queensland Premier David Crisafulli. The Premier will provide an update on his government's priorities for the state's economy, including the desire to expand into new sectors. David Crisafulli with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia on Ngunnawal country for today's Westpac address. My name is Jane Norman. I'm the ABC's National Affairs correspondent and a director here at the club. Our guest today is Queensland Premier David Crisafulli. He's at the helm of one of the fastest growing economies in the nation, fuelled by mining and partly a huge pipeline of infrastructure projects planned for the Brisbane Olympics. But today, Mr Crisafulli is focused on the future, outlining his vision for Queensland's next generation economy. 15 months into the top job, Mr Crisafulli, I'm sure, feels very at home here at the National Press Club, having been a journalist in a former life and also a councillor before making the move into state politics. You can join the conversation on Twitter. Our hashtag is @PressClubAust, and that's it. Our handle, is @PressClubAust, and our hashtag is NPC. Please welcome David Crisafulli.
Thanks very much, Jane. A Queensland of opportunity is ready for you. Whether you want to invest or relocate, Queensland is ready for you. Whether you're young or old, Queensland is ready for you. Whether you're in traditional industries or those new age opportunities, Queensland is ready for you. And I see my address today in two parts. The first is to show the fourth estate what a good centre-right government looks like and is delivering for a great state on the cusp of something very, very special. And the second is a message to the country. We are on a raid to bring opportunities north of the border, and there's never been a better time for people to do so. There is a buzz at the moment in the Sunshine State. There really is. And it's not just because we won the AFL, the NRL, the State of Origin, shortly the Sheffield Shield. Thank you. I love when there's Queenslanders in a room. But there is a real buzz, a real sense of opportunity. I remember as a kid growing up in country Queensland what it felt like in the 80s heading into the World Expo 88. We'd just been granted that, and even though it was at the other end of the state, I still remember as a kid in country Queensland what it felt like in the sense of pride and optimism. I then remember in the early 2000s as a journalist that wave of business migration, which also led to people heading north of the border, and how that felt. Well, I can tell you at the moment, the buzz is greater than ever before. It surpasses both of those periods, and you can feel it everywhere you go. And my message today to people, wherever you are, look to Queensland for opportunities because we won't let you down. So why Queensland and why now? I want to start with the solutions that we're delivering to those big challenges that I spoke a lot about before the election. And by dealing with those challenges, we've created an environment which is both great for business and also for lifestyle. I want to start with crime. I spoke a lot before the election about crime, and I put a lot on the line when I said there would be fewer victims of crime. Well, the first full year results are in for 2025, and victim numbers in Queensland have fallen by 7.3%. Now, we're certainly not celebrating that because that's a very, very small reduction, but I want to put it into perspective. In the last decade, prior to us coming to office, victim numbers increased by 193%. So yes, it's a small reduction, but it's finally a trend in the right direction, and it's a sign of what can happen when you deal with the issues. Yes, there's been a lot made of our stronger laws and more police, but the unwritten story remains what we have done with early intervention, the first injection in rehabilitation in many generations. We are investing when a young person leaves detention in a way that we've never seen before. And our view is to do something about that recidivism rate, and by investing in that, we do believe we can stop that pipeline of the revolving door that people are seeing in those youth justice centres. I want to turn to health. And obviously, ambulance ramping remains the #1 challenge for all jurisdictions. It's become the barometer by which we are measured. Ambulance ramping reached 45.7% at its peak prior to us coming to office. The most recent figures have just come in for the December quarter, and we've fallen to 37.3%. That's the lowest in half a decade. When it comes to elective surgery waitlists, our promise was by Christmas last year we would have stabilised that elective surgery waitlist. We've done a little better than that. There's a few thousand people who've been taken off that list, and our view is that we can continue to treat more people more soon in more locations across the state. Housing remains a massive challenge, but the confidence in the state is bringing results. Today I can reveal that ABS approvals that have just landed for the year to December shows that approval numbers in Queensland have risen by 11.9%. The most recent data on commencements, which is to the September quarter, shows that we are up 12.8%. Master builders have a report today which shows that Queensland is the only state where capital productivity has headed in the right direction in the last full financial year. What have we done? Well, for a start, we've been willing to partner with anyone who wants to deliver supply. We have a program with local government which is called the Residential Activation Fund. It's delivered 98,000 additional lots which otherwise would have been stuck in limbo of who will fund it. Will it be stuck in the Planning Environment Court? And on the back of that, we're starting to see these lots come to market. Our development of social and affordable housing is 4 times higher than the average of the last 10 years, making sure that there is a roof over the head for society's most vulnerable. In the end, that's an important KPI that any government wants to achieve, how we treat those who are most vulnerable in our society. So if you want the best place to live or invest, Queensland is ready for you. So what do you get for investing in Queensland? Well, firstly, it's certainty. A no means no, but it will be delivered quickly. A yes means yes, and we'll find every way we can to facilitate that process. And that means government agencies working together, that means streamlining approval processes, that means setting a standard and holding people accountable to it. We're creating the right conditions for people to want to invest and be part of Queensland. I want to turn to budget repair because it is a very topical issue at the moment. And we're seeing the pressure that governments are being put under, justifiably at the moment, in an era where household budgets are stretched like never before. Our expenses growth has halved for our operating expense from a 10-year average of 6.6% per annum. Despite that, the capital pipeline for Queensland is the largest it has ever been. $117.9 billion of works in the next 4 years. What does that look like? Well, the bulk of it's in health, and people understand that and they expect it, and we can't deal with the issues of ambulance ramping and elective surgery wait lists if we don't have the beds and the staff to serve people in their hour of need. We've got 3 new hospitals which are being built. We have 10 major upgrades and a host of other accommodation and investments in infrastructure where people live. As an example, 6 MRIs, 9 CT scanners, and they're spread right across the state. This is what a long-term view looks like. Prior to us coming to office, there was those 3 hospitals which had been discussed. In a bid to try to get the capital cost down, 2 of those hospitals had been decided to have a split campus, leaving the existing facility and building a smaller, newer facility. We looked at it, and the long-term operational expenses and the growth in that were to the tune of many hundreds of millions of dollars. We can offset the additional capital of building a brand new standalone facility and pay for it in less than half a decade. Now that means that we're going to have some pressure with that capital expenditure, but it makes sense. And long term, it's about taking a generational attitude to the delivery of services for a state that is growing. I mentioned workforce, and it's our biggest challenge when it comes to the health sector. We've increased the number of doctors and nurses in our first year in office by nearly 5,000, but the pressure remains real. We have the largest intake of recruit GPs in the history of any state or territory, despite our smaller number in terms of population, because we are so decentralised. There's 930 trainee doctors starting. We're working with the paramedics in the rural and remote hospitals for them to actually be providing treatment inside those facilities as a way of helping deal with that pressure. And we're very grateful to the staff for doing that. Another big cost is obviously roads. We want every part of this state to benefit from a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We have a project called Country Roads Connect, which is about finding those missing pieces of the puzzle, roads that are bitumened at one end and the other, but have a missing piece, which means getting product to market becomes very difficult, particularly during the wet season. So we're unashamedly doing that. We're investing in the growth, particularly that comes with the pressures in the southeast of the state. But the biggest investment is in the Bruce Highway. It's the lifeblood of regional Queensland, and it's been subject to underinvestment for many generations. I went to the election campaign and we did our costings for a major investment on that, and we did our costings on an 80-20 federal funding split. My belief is it's a federal road, and as a result, the lion's share of that road should be done by the Commonwealth. It's the only road that has had the quantum of lives lost on it year on year being at the top of the nation. And I went to the election with that commitment, and we were able to secure that. And we were very grateful for the way that we worked with the federal government in doing it. But on the back of it, there's a $9 billion investment in the Bruce Highway. To put that into perspective, that's greater than the quantum we're spending on all of the sports facilities to host the Olympic and Paralympic Games. It's a serious investment, but it's needed. That road, for the most decentralised state in the country, is life or death. It is life or death for people, and it means so much to those smaller communities in being able to connect the goods and services that they rely on. To rail, where we are investing across the state, and when you look at the opportunities for mining, it has to occur. But there's also the connectivity between the Gold and the Sunshine Coast, big population centres that we need to move people. And we're investing very, very heavily in rail in both directions. Schools, 15 new schools. I look at the population explosion, and we have to provide growth in that sector. We have to work with the independent and the Catholic schools to also meet the huge challenges that come with a growing state. And we're doing something that hasn't been done in a long, long time. We're building 6 dedicated special schools. I believe in choice, and I want that choice available for parents. Whether or not their child should go to a mainstream school or a special school is a choice that parents haven't had the luxury of because we haven't built a lot of them across the country for a long time, and I think they're an important part of the education journey. I want to touch on the Games because it is a big opportunity for us. And I think even my harshest of critics would acknowledge we came to office at a time when people were looking for certainty in it. It had been 1,200 days since the Games had been bid and won, and there had been next to no planning. We've got that back on track. And in many ways, the Games will be a symbol of our ability to plan, deliver, and be productive. There is a deadline, and that's a great thing to have for government, for private sector, to give that focal point. And that deadline is everything from those roads and the rail to that long-term tourism vision. It's a great opportunity for us. But the venues are also important. So here's what's rolling out in Queensland at the moment. We're building a world-class oval stadium, which will be amazing for hosting the event. But it will also be a great legacy play. 63,000 seats, the home of AFL and cricket, a great venue for entertainment. A national aquatic centre. It'll be the best in the country. It may end up being the best in the globe. And for a state that prides itself on our quality of swimmers, we see that as a pretty great legacy play. We're working with the private sector to deliver an arena for entertainment purposes. And by uncoupling that from the Games spend, it enables us to be able to deliver more infrastructure and stay within the funding envelope that we've promised Queenslanders we will. On the Gold and the Sunshine Coast, indoor centres, entertainment precincts to change the way that those cities look and feel. The regions will be front and centre for great opportunity. I look at the opportunities for football and hopefully cricket as well. After last night's results, well, maybe not. But a golden opportunity for Cairns, Townsville, Mackay to host those events. Sailing will be held in the Whitsundays and Townsville. Think of those images of the most beautiful place you'll see in the country, the backdrop of Magnetic Island and Hamilton Island. Think about the opportunities for that. Archery in our beautiful heritage centre of Maryborough. Equestrian in Toowoomba. What a legacy play that is. And yes, rowing will be in Rockhampton. And we're determined to make sure that's the case. I'll tell you why. This is a licence from the state for us to host the Games and for people to be proud. It had reached the point only a couple of years ago, there was an active mood in parts of the state to say, no, we don't want the Games. And that's something that I just couldn't possibly comprehend. But that was the mood of the state. By delivering a plan for every part of Queensland, by making sure we can show people that it'll be done on budget, we've re-energised it. And what people were saying to me previously is, I just don't want to be embarrassed. I'm concerned about being humiliated on the world stage. That's flipped on its head. And people are now saying they feel energised. They see a sense of optimism. They know that the Games are for all of them. And overwhelmingly, they're backing it and backing it hard. All of this is done with a lens of restoring productivity. By ending the best practice industry conditions, which was neither best nor well practiced, we called it the CFMEU tax. We have restored productivity on Queensland job sites. Reports show that that tax would prevent 77,000 homes during the life of that agreement, would have cost the state directly to 2029 over $20 billion. And we've launched a commission of inquiry, and every day the tales of woe deepen. Misogyny, bullying, intimidation, standover tactics, jobs for mates, not on our watch. And by taking on the CFMEU and putting that front and centre, we are showing that we are a state that values productivity. So this is what we want to see. We want workers well paid. We want them to be safe. We want productivity to return. We want contracts to be honoured. And when that occurs, there is an opportunity for jobs to flow on, to be affordable, for people to be able to not have those cost of living pressures that come with paying more for the same service. And we are determined to make sure that we get Queensland back to a place where people look at and quite rightly see as that land of opportunity. My vision for the traditional industries that have made the state what we are today is to not just hold but to strengthen those traditional industries. I talk about Destination 2045, our 20-year tourism vision. By 2045, we will have invested and helped get to market 45 ecotourism projects. You'll see many of them prior to 2032. We're blessed with natural assets. And I've looked and I've seen the likes of Tasmania and New Zealand be able to bring them to market in an environmentally respectful way, in a way that gets young people a job, that creates economic opportunities, and I just don't know why that hasn't been the case in Queensland, and we believe we can make that occur. We've embarked on an aviation attraction fund, and so far that's yielded new flights from New Zealand, Malaysia, Qatar, the US, and next month the Tourism Minister will be going to India in a bid to attract direct flights from Delhi, which is a really important part of our economic jigsaw puzzle, and I'll discuss that a little more later on. We also have a vision of being the events capital in this country. Just last weekend, we hosted the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. That's the first time it's been held in Queensland in its 75-year history. 130,000 people over 4 days, hotels full, and a real sense of optimism around the state. In April, Sting will launch our new Glasshouse Theatre with his last ship show. He is playing in 4 centres: Paris, Amsterdam, New York and Brisbane. Home ownership. Everything we do is about giving people hope and aspiration for their next journey in life and wanting to put roots down. We have abolished stamp duty entirely on all new homes for first home buyers. Our vision is to go from last to first on the percentage of people who own a home in Queensland. I also want home ownership for our Indigenous communities. We have 16 Indigenous communities where there's a council located, and people in those communities aren't able to own a home, and I don't comprehend that. And that should be a choice given to them. And we're well on the way to providing that for the first community, which will be Palm Island and off Townsville, and that will be happening shortly. We're investing in infrastructure to make that occur, and the days of seeing substandard facilities like quality drinking water must be behind us. We have to invest and work with those councils to deliver it. Agriculture. Agriculture is the reason I'm here. I'm the product of the migration in the late 50s, early 60s to Queensland on the back of agriculture. We have what we're calling Prosper 2050, a long-term vision for agriculture with a short-term checkpoint. By 2030, agriculture will be worth $30 billion in Queensland. That's nearly double of what it was when we came to office. And we're doing that by certainty on land tenure, water security, and investing heavily in research and development. To mining and energy. The mining industry in Queensland means so much to us as a state. Economically, the opportunities for people to earn really good money in regional areas, the opportunity for people to be able to be part of a new wave. We recently released our energy roadmap, free from ideology, free from any form of contentious calls, affordable, reliable and sustainable electricity. And that to me is where the vast majority of Australians are. We have the youngest fleet of coal-fired power stations in the country, and we are investing in them to make sure that we sweat those assets, that we get the most out of it. We have an abundance of gas, and we see that as a great transition fuel and very important for those regions who are in the coal generation industry at the moment. And then there's renewables. What a golden opportunity. And one of the things that we've been very, very diligent about, and it's been led by the Deputy Premier who's joining us today, is make sure there is a clear planning framework to say that we are open for business and we want renewable energies in the areas where they belong. We are on the cusp of delivering what's called Copper String, a $13.9 billion project. We've been able to get the budget under control. We're building the right connection point back to the national energy retailer. We're going eastwards first. And on the back of it, we see a massive opportunity. If you're in the renewable energy industry, there is a swathe of area where you can invest with the backing of the local councils. You can get land at the right price and you can be part of a great transition that we are leading in this state. Mining needs certainty around conditions, taxation, environmental approvals, and we are delivering that. Our investment certainty is paying dividends, and I look at some of the projects we've been able to work together to deliver. We've helped the Mount Isa copper smelter with 3 levels of government stay open. Eva Copper is a new opportunity outside of Cloncurry, and Fitzroy Australia are investing heavily in the coal industry in the Bowen Basin. But today I want to talk about the next generation opportunity and the next generation economy. Today I can announce, when it comes to critical minerals, Queensland will push hard to secure investment from the United States as part of the deal, and I'll be leading a trade delegation to the US in the weeks ahead to make it happen. The Prime Minister and the President have opened the door. We are the only state ready and willing to walk through it and capitalise today. And it's big business. We aren't going to wait for it to come to us. We are sitting on a treasure trove in Queensland. We are home to 51 of the world's most sought-after critical minerals. Queensland has many of them that the defence industry needs, including rare earths, vanadium, tungsten, natural graphite and copper. We are globally significant hosts for indium, gallium, germanium, all high-value critical minerals that currently have restricted global predictions with huge demand forecasts. And our mineral exports of bauxite, alumina, zinc, lead, silver and of course copper have increased year on year. Queensland companies, whether they mine or manufacture critical minerals, are ready for investment. Here's just 4 projects ready to go and the federal contribution I've asked the Prime Minister to jointly fund as part of the historic US deal. EQ Resources requires a $26.3 million capital contribution to more than double production of a tungsten mine northwest of Cairns. For those keen political observers, that is in Leichhardt. With just $10 million, we can expand a critical mineral processing centre in Mackay to explore opportunities for new technology to maximise extraction from tailings. A resource common user facility outside of Townsville can be used to supercharge explorers and miners to get their products to market faster for $37 million, and a $227 million capital injection on the Mount Isa to Townsville rail line, which can open up untapped opportunities for the northwest and make it viable to get critical minerals to market quickly and reliably. We're doing our bit. We're streamlining approvals. We're fast-tracking projects. We're showing we are open for business. We're banging down doors across the country and the globe. If you want to invest in minerals or wear a hard hat on a job site, Queensland is ready for you. I want to turn to the importance of governance and the role that Queensland can play. In a geopolitically instability that exists in the Asia region, Queensland has never been more important. Today I'm refreshing our bid to host the Quad Leaders Summit when it is Australia's turn next. We have received support from Canberra for Queensland to host it when it is time, and I want to briefly explain why. Japan is one of our oldest and most trusted partners. Queensland's mining and tourism would not look like what it does today if it wasn't for Japanese investment over many decades. We look to India, the opportunities around agriculture, education, the growing opportunities that comes with an emerging middle class on our doorstep. And the US is the superpower we have relied on for many generations. The Quad is a relationship we must nurture, and Queensland stands to benefit more than any other jurisdiction from it. I'll be using my visit to the United States to push for a full-time consular presence, which is lacking at the moment in Queensland. We do not wish to be in the shadow of Sydney. We do believe that we are a standalone state and business needs a clear instruction of the importance of being able to connect with the United States, and we intend to go out and grab that. For our part, we're investing in the capability and the competency of a world-class public service. We are putting customer service front and centre of all that we do. If you need help unlocking opportunities, the Queensland Government is ready for you. I want to turn to defence industry. We have more veterans than anywhere else in the state. 70% of the Army's fighting force is based in Queensland, but we wish to take it to the next level. The Deputy Premier has just come from the Australian Defence Magazine Congress, where he's delivered a keynote address explaining we're open for business. Yesterday he met with the Chief of Army, the Chief of Defence. We intend to seize those opportunities. We've launched a Sovereign Industry Development Fund. It's a $180 million fund. It closes at the end of this month. It's our way of saying to people, choose Queensland to invest in opportunities in a defence industry that will underpin the next wave of our economy and will be hugely important with the US, coupled with the critical minerals that they need. There's a $2.5 billion project which is emerging, which is the Cairncross Dockyard in Brisbane. We've prescribed it as a dedicated project under the Coordinator General. It could revitalise Australia's second largest shipyard, 1,000 direct jobs. In the north of the state, the Townsville Aviation Academy, a partnership between Boeing and Aviation Australia, training maintenance engineers who will work on the Apache helicopters. And finally, I want to talk about the fourth point, which is business relocation to Queensland. If you dream of a fresh start, Queensland is ready for you. Why wouldn't you choose to move north of the border? Why wouldn't you want to seize the opportunities? The eyes of the world aren't just on us, they're on your businesses. And we urge you to take the opportunity that comes with investing in a jurisdiction that wants your business and that wants to do everything we can to facilitate you seizing those opportunities. I spoke about that buzz. It's real. You can feel it. And the 2032 Games are a big part of it, but it's certainly not the only part of it. It's a midway point, a checkpoint, if you might, on our road to achieving great things for our state and our nation. I urge you to grab that opportunity. So, if you want to take the opportunity that so few places in the world ever get to seize, benefit and grow from, Queensland is ready for you. If you want to offer your workforce the best lifestyle in the world, supported by a pro-investment, pro-industry, pro-growth government, Queensland is ready for you. If you're willing to work hard and back yourself to seize a once-in-a-generation opportunity, Queensland is ready for you. It truly is a Queensland of opportunity. Thanks for having me today.
Premier, thank you so much for your address today. And there are some great news hooks that we'll be asking you about: the visit to the United States, critical minerals, the Quad Leaders Summit. But I wanted to take the opportunity first to zoom out and ask you more broadly about the realignment we're starting to see in Conservative politics across the country. You're in a pretty unique position in Queensland where the LNP brand is strong, certainly much stronger when compared to your state counterparts in the federal Liberal Party. I wanted to get your assessment, being a Queenslander, of the threat posed by One Nation right now to your party and what it is you think has led to this kind of decline of the Liberal Party's stocks at the same time as we're seeing in the published opinion polls a rise in One Nation stocks.
I'm not surprised you asked me, Jane. I didn't think it'd escalate that quickly, but righto, here we are.
Got to take my opportunity.
Well, in Queensland, we're a unique entity. The LNP is a party it's uniquely Queensland. It was formed in Queensland, for Queenslanders, by Queenslanders, and it works. The greatest panacea to minor parties is to do things, is to deliver, and we're in the fortunate position that we're living and breathing it at the moment. And I've got a view that if you go to an election and you're focused on certain issues, you've got to stand by them. I started my address today speaking about those big challenges, and we've genuinely made inroads on all of them. We've got a long way to go, but I hope that's repaying the faith to people on the issues they trusted us with. And then there's that new opportunity that comes with doing things. So we're in a fortunate position. We're in government. People can live and see our values unfolding. And on the back of it, I think people can see what a good centre-right modern government looks like.
So you're sort of leading by example.
It's doing what you say. It's delivering the things and making sure that you never stray from the issues that were your big factors when you came to office. And overwhelmingly, we're doing that.
And One Nation, a threat to federal colleagues, state colleagues, the South Australia elections coming up? Yeah,
I've always prided myself on not being a political commentator, and I think when politicians do, people quite rightly say, well, you cherry pick when you do and want to talk about these things. But I can only use our example as fulfilling faith with people in what we said we'd do. And ultimately, you have to acknowledge the environment that it exists in. People are genuinely hurting. Like the cost of doing things is real. You know, we see again today health premiums going up. All of those things cause people to lose faith in institutions. What we can do is show through delivery that we're serious about listening to them, reflecting and living those values. So we're in a different position. We're in government, and I think that puts us in a different stead.
Okay, we have lots of journos asking questions today. The first is Ellen Ransley from the Courier Mail.
Hi, Premier. Thanks for your speech today. Thanks for being here in Canberra. You talked a lot about Queensland being open for investment today, but under the royalties regime that your government inherited, investment in the mining sector has slowed. BHP's half-year results out yesterday showed they had a 0% return on capital deployed in Queensland, and it's having significant trickle-down effects. Sports clubs in Mackay and Moranbah can't get sponsors. Small businesses can't take on apprentices, or they're cutting staff. People are thinking of leaving the region or have already left. And it also, on a statewide level, runs the risk of putting the budget at risk, struggling to pay for hospitals, schools and games infrastructure. You've said you won't touch the scheme in this term of government, but the conditions clearly aren't right for mining investment. So will you at least commit to reviewing the scheme in this term of government?
Alan, the point you make is always one that we have to listen to, of course, but the reality of investment in Queensland mining doesn't reflect the view of that one company. Now, I haven't come here today to throw rocks at BHP. They've been long-term supporters of Queensland, and in any industry and commodity prices that are cyclical, there'll always be ups and downs. I note that their income rose to about 40 billion and their profits have risen to about 8 billion. They're reasonable numbers. I assure you I'd love to see a 20% return on investment in our game, I can assure you. But across the board, we've got new investment coming in. We've, part of my trade delegation to Japan, unlocked some new investment in the coal industry. Next door, Bravis are increasing their throughput and to the tune of another 600 jobs that'll be opened up. And across the board, we believe in the stability. So we went to the election and said there'd be no changes to those royalties, but what we also said is that you're going to have a government that gives you certainty on approvals, and we'll do everything we can to facilitate that new investment, and we'll work with people. But if I was to do that commitment, and yes, it was made by the previous government, they've been baked into the Fords. I would effectively be having to take $1 off a school or a hospital and give it back to a multinational. Now, what we can do is facilitate their investment and their long-term interest in Queensland, and whilst the coal price has ticked up a little lately, it is at historic levels, and the last time we saw the coal price at a low level like this, some mines were closed. Interestingly, exactly that mine you're talking about was mothballed last time the coal price was low. So we'll work with anyone who wants to invest in Queensland, and what you do have is a pro-growth government that is open for business, that does believe there is a future for all forms of minerals, and we are ready to work with people who want to do that.
So you don't think the scheme needs to be reviewed?
I don't, because the living, breathing examples is that people see we're a pro-growth government who are giving that stability. But I'll tell you what else won't happen. They won't wake up one day to a crazy new tax, which is what has been in the past. They won't find a government that's finding new ways to regulate them out of existence. We'll set high environmental standards, but we won't move the goalpost once that's done. And all that facilitates an environment where people will want to invest. And people are showing that with their feet.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Shane Wright from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age.
G'day, Premier. Shane Wright from the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age and the Brisbane Times. Loved the list of numbers that you had through the speech, but you left one out, which was the inflation rate. Brisbane has the highest inflation rate by a large margin at 5.2%. You also went through the large number of infrastructure projects that you've got underway, and you've got a games to get built as well. The IMF this week said the state funding, the state spending on infrastructure is a problem. The amount of debt, and your state's on track for about 200 billion by the end of the decade, and it said there needs to be much better coordination between the states with the feds about the rollout of infrastructure, because you are competing for the same people and you're driving up prices for major projects. What do you think of that suggestion?
We've all got a part to play in those pressures on inflation, Shane. We all do. And one of the things we're doing is making sure that the money we spend delivers through productivity and getting more bang for our buck. Our overall capital spend, we've been able to find some savings there. There was a project which had escalated to the $36 billion, which was a pumped hydro project that, quite frankly, was never going to work, and the private sector was telling us that. But the greatest thing we can do is make sure that we tighten our belt on our operational expenditure, and I mentioned before 6.6% growth year on year over the last decade. We've halved that, so that's a big deal. And we are working to make sure that the capital projects, and we do need to do them, that we can deliver them on time and on budget. Now, there are a number of factors that are causing inflation to rise, and the state's role is to make sure that the things we control and those projects that we do, if we keep them on time and on budget, and if we can find ways not to try to find new ways to tax people, I do believe long term, with more housing that's coming through extra supply, with greater discipline with the way we're providing our services, I think we can play our part in what is genuinely a national conversation around cost of living pressures.
Working with other states, though, in the timing projects?
Well, why would you not want to be in Queensland? So the other states can just get in the queue. And look, Shane, I think there's a fair realisation at the moment that, for example, there's not as much happening in Victoria as what there might have been a couple of years ago, and I think that's to our advantage. We've got a deadline of 2032 that we have to build things, but it's not just the Games. I mentioned before, the Games is circa $7.2 billion. That's dwarfed in a capital spend of nearly $120 billion across the 4-year period. So it's part of the mix. But there really is the opportunity for us to benefit from the energy that's there at the moment. And I think you will start to see more people moving across the border. You're already feeling that. Like there was a lifestyle drift that was driving it in recent years. It's now really being driven on a work necessity. And some of the other states are, I think it's pretty well acknowledged, it might have slowed a little bit. We're just getting started.
Elizabeth Pike from The Australian.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you very much, Premier, for your address. Pauline Hanson has made comments this week questioning whether there are good Muslims. What is your response to those comments, and are those comments a warning to Conservatives who are flirting with a switch to one nation?
I don't agree with them. I don't agree with them. And I never engage in the extremes of politics. I never do. And when you have blanket statements, it never works. No blanket statement is ever true. So the best thing I can do is explain to people through what we're doing about the importance of living and breathing our values. And our values are making sure that we do the things we say, that we're a tolerant state and a tolerant a place for people to come. But the conversation around migration, which when you're not dealing with the extremes, but the conversation around migration, the reason why that's happening, quite justifiably, is people are feeling the pressure in getting a house, their kids ever being able to afford one, pressures on hospitals, roads that are congested, and I think that's a very fair and reasonable conversation. That's the conversation we have to have. What's a good migration level? How can we deliver facilities for a growing state and a country? That's dealing with the issue. I don't deal with the extremities. I've never been somebody who chases extremities in politics.
But do you believe those blanket statements, as you've said, will be a warning to traditional Conservatives who may be flirting with a switch to one nation?
Anyone who looks at that objectively would look at that statement and feel that's just not right, and might even feel a little uncomfortable about it. What I want to do, and I've got a national audience today, is to show what happens when you do plan and you do build and the opportunities that come with it. I'm the product of multiculturalism. My father's a migrant. You know, it was the opportunity to go and swing a cane knife in the fields of North Queensland that brought my grandfather here when he was 40 years of age. So if you're asking me whether or not migration is an important part of our story as a country, the example is absolutely yes. But if you're asking whether or not there should be a conversation around the numbers and the delivery of infrastructure to make sure that Australians can benefit from that migration, of course there is. But there's a different conversation. If you're dealing with the extremities, that's a completely different conversation. And I don't think the majority of Australians are there. The majority of Australians who are talking about it are talking about the pressures that come with poor planning, poor delivery, and no clinical debate and a coherent debate on immigration policy. That's vastly different to blanket generalisations, which just doesn't do any good for anyone.
Thank you.
The new Liberal leader, Angus Taylor, is putting a firm focus on immigration, and he says his phrase is, the numbers are too high and the quality is too low, in his words. Do you think that that is veering into the kind of extremities of the debate where you don't want to go?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think it's actually discussing exactly front and centre the pressure that people are feeling. People are genuinely fearful. And I mention hospitals and roads because that's primarily our jurisdiction, and schools, which I've mentioned we're spending a lot on. But it's housing where it's front and centre. Like when you... I recently sat in a room full of young people on the Gold Coast, and aged between sort of 18 and 25, and I spoke to them and I said, you know, there's a couple of dozen of them. Who here would like to own a home? And the majority put their hand up, and I thought, well, that's great aspiration. And I said, who thinks they will in the next 10 years? And there was literally 3 hands left out of a couple of dozen. And these were young, engaged Queenslanders. For goodness sake, they'd come to speak to a politician on a Saturday morning. So, you know, they were engaged. And the vast majority of them, the overwhelming majority, 90% of them, didn't think they'd own a home in the next 10 years. That really struck a chord with me.
All right, James Riley from Innovation Oz.
Thanks, Premier, and thanks for your presentation and for coming to Canberra. I wanted to ask you about the Queensland Government's investment, or $470 million investment in PsiQuantum, the US quantum computing company, $940 million if you add the federal government's contribution. It's 2 years, nearly, since that investment was announced. The company still hasn't broken ground on its manufacturing site at Brisbane Airport. Brisbane Airport still hasn't introduced its development plan for that. There's a consultation period that follows. In the meantime, a secondary site has been built, or is being built, in Chicago. Now, given that this investment, huge, it's a significant amount of money, obviously, but this investment was to build the world's first quantum computer in Brisbane. Are you satisfied that the company remains committed to that project? And secondly, you were talking about yes means yes in terms of investment attraction. You can't say yes more emphatically than giving a company $470 million. So in terms of knocking down those regulatory issues to get that thing built, where are you at?
Well, you'd be well aware that that was a deal signed prior to us coming to office, but I have a view that if a deal is signed, it should be honoured, and that should be the hallmark. When governments change, there should still be continuity and certainty. But if you're asking whether or not we'll be holding that company accountable to doing what they say they're going to do, the answer is absolutely, categorically yes. And there won't be money flowing until there's clear deliverables, and I think that's the greatest thing we can do. In terms of its value, there's always mixed results whenever you're on the verge of new technology. There always will be difference of opinions. A contract was entered into, it was 50-50 between the state and the federal government, and our view is that contract will be honoured if they meet their end of the bargain, but only if and when they do.
Claire Armstrong from ABC News.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks, Premier, for your time today. Queensland has the most guns of any jurisdiction in the country. You've refused to take part in a national gun buyback, and the alternative laws that you've proposed don't address the number or the types of guns that Queenslanders can own. So if Australia's gun laws are only as strong as its weakest state, why are you willing for Queensland to be that weak link?
Well, I dispute the weak link term, Claire. It's quite on the opposite. We're dealing with it. We're dealing with it like no one else is, and we're taking on terrorists and criminals. And if you want to ask me why I'm so determined to go our own way on that, and I should say, obviously the Prime Minister and I have a very different view on this, and that's okay. That should be part of a democracy, to be able to have different views. But if you want my answer on the number of guns that an individual should have, the answer is 0 if they are a criminal or a terrorist. And I don't think allowing that person to have 4, 3, 2 or 1 gun is acceptable. So our laws that we put into place deal with that front and centre, including laws to be able to intercept people before they do one of those attacks. Now, what happened in Bondi shook us all to the core. It really did. And we've got a large and a strong Jewish community in Queensland. We're really proud of how they've integrated and what they've done with us. And we listened and reflected on how big a deal that tragedy was. And whilst there's court proceedings, I'll make this observation. without reflecting on any individuals involved. If somebody has terrorist affiliations or sympathies, if they've been to nations that are front and centre of training camps for radicalised individuals, those people should have no guns. Reducing the number of guns that someone like that should have is I just don't believe that's part of the conversation. So what we're doing is we're making sure that we're dealing with people who want to print 3D guns. We're putting that at the front and centre. We're making sure that where people fail, for example, mental health checks, and we've put in place a system to deal with that as well. Once, if people go into, for example, an emergency department, we've got better sharing of information. We don't believe if you're not an Aussie that you shouldn't own a gun. We don't believe that somebody who displays aggressive behaviour, for example, with weapons and crimes, should have a gun. So we're putting all that on the table. I just have a very different view about a number of guns, because I think the number should be 0 where somebody's inappropriate to have one.
So could I just ask, do you think those laws would potentially prevent a future Wiambila? The family of those fallen officers have said they'd support a gun buyback.
Well, I think what we've put in place front and centre would deal with someone who's radicalised and is a sovereign citizen. But in the case of someone like that, they shouldn't have a licence. They shouldn't have a gun. And by putting that front and centre, you keep your community safe. Everything we did was about dealing with the nub of the problem. And we were dealing with an issue that stemmed from an anti-Semitic attack, which rocked the nation to a core. And our laws around that were very specific and very focused around anti-Semitism, very tight. And our laws around the guns were to deal with terrorists and the crooks who shouldn't have them.
Ryan Kropp from the Australian Financial Review.
Thank you, Premier. Ryan Kropp from the AFR. You mentioned that you want to be a model for centre-right governments around the country. You're a popular centre-right government in a resources state that has maintained a legislated commitment to net zero. Why have you done this? Do you think that a basic commitment to climate policy, emissions reduction and net zero is a kind of is the entry point to government in Australia? And do you think that your federal counterparts have overstepped the line by abandoning this commitment?
Ryan, I won't be a political commentator, but I'll give you our reflection and have a look at our energy roadmap. Our energy roadmap overwhelmingly has been well received across the board. And if you unpack it, there's a reason why. And I think what's happened is there's been really polarising debate on it. There has. And the way that either side have really energised and weaponised, in my mind, has meant there's a vacuum about a good transition and what it looks like. And I think we handle that reasonably well. So there's one side which is really pushing hard about you've got to close coal-fired power stations immediately, which would be a recipe for disaster. We would have industries in Queensland that would be thrown to the wolves immediately. You'd have a spike in people's bills that the everyday person would not be able to afford to be able to live. So we looked at it and we believe that with an investment in those assets, we can keep those coal-fired power stations running longer than what had been slated, and I think that makes sense. We then got an abundance of gas and we haven't utilised that, and gas is a great transition fuel, so that equally will help. And then we're the state with a whole heap of sun and wind. And what a golden opportunity there. And we're investing, for example, and I mentioned Copper String is a great project that can help bring in those renewables. But we're not running at it at 100 miles an hour. We're not turning things off tomorrow to make a political point. We're just going on a journey. And that's the journey that majority of people are. I don't think there's anyone who you would say, hey, do you think we should be increasing our emissions, who say, absolutely, let's try and find new ways to warm the planet. Most people wouldn't be there. The argument and why it has become so polarised is because it's become a right now or never. And I just think there's a coherent argument. And if you read our energy roadmap, I think we've threaded the needle in a way that no one else has.
But net zero has become a kind of proxy for that what you're describing there, right? Do you think that you need to have that basic commitment to win government?
But well, you saw what I took to the election and you saw our energy roadmap. But as I said, what's happened as a result of either side being engaged in this combat of climate clash, I think there's been a middle point and I think we're living it. And I think overwhelmingly a state that's got an abundance of coal, an abundance of gas and an abundance of wind and solar, I think we're pretty well placed. And my message to people is, if you're looking for somewhere to invest, Queensland's open for business. If you want to invest in mining coal, we believe there is a long-term future because, by the way, there's no doubt that coal is going to continue to be used as a source of power for a long, long time across the globe. And the best coal, mined to the highest environmental standards with the best workers' rights, happen to be in Queensland. So the only thing we could do by stopping coal mining is making some point at the altar of environmental stupidity, and that wouldn't benefit either Queensland or the globe's emissions. So that's a part of it, and we're encouraging people to invest in coal, and we will use coal. I look at gas, where our state, over many years, has been the state that's been prepared to say, no, we're going to invest in gas, and we haven't listened to a lot of the noisy people on the outside. We've done that. I believe there's an argument that that can be used for our power prices, and we're announcing some of the first peak power gas peak power plants, investment in a long, long time. And then renewables are happening now. The market is determining that there are opportunities for renewables. So I can't get hot and bothered about it because we're living it and it's working. And overwhelmingly, people are coming on the journey with us.
Thanks.
All right, Matthew Franklin from Capital Brief.
Hi, Premier. Matthew Franklin from Capital Brief. As you know, from Jane's question earlier and from just debate, immigration is the go here in Canberra at the moment. You've got One Nation saying that they want to reduce it, or migration. They say the coalition appears to want to as well, although they're still working out their positions. You're the Premier of a state and you've come here today to outline a very large infrastructure program. You're also the Premier of a state with significant, like the country, shortages in skilled workers. What is your advice to your federal counterparts as they consider their position about skilled migration? We might want to cut migration per se, but with the amount of work that you've got, don't you need more skilled migrants to come and deliver it for you?
I'm not into giving advice to other politicians. My only advice would be stay united and don't listen to other politicians. But in terms of workers, we do need more people building things in Queensland, and we've mapped out a plan to do it, and part of the reason why we're investing so heavily in housing is we see that as an underlying demand that's going to be needed for years to come. But there will be a debate at a federal level about migration, and there should be, because there's a real mood in the community to make sure that their kids can afford a house and that they're not overrun. That is something that people are talking about, and they should be listened to. Likewise, we do need people to build the things that we need. And I happen to think that people will come across the border from interstate, other parts of Queensland where they move, and overseas. And that's just part of the journey. But there has to be a proper conversation around migration. And I think it shouldn't become a partisan battle. It should become a genuine reflection on what the nation needs in terms of number of people, where they go and the industries they work in. I'm from a state that without the Pacific labour force, bananas wouldn't get picked. And it's a pretty important part of our economy and indeed all of your lives. It's a great fruit, eat plenty of it. But that's part of the mix. That's part of the mix. And overwhelmingly, people understand the importance of that to underpin an economy. It just has to be done with a level of sobriety and coherence, and if it is, I think we will come to the right decision as a country, and we will get back to talking about the issue, which is planning and delivery, and that's what we're living at the moment.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Emily Saunders from the Nine Network.
Hi, Premier. Just on your pitch to host the Quad, there's no guarantees that Donald Trump will want to be part of a Quad in Queensland. What exactly is your pitch to him, and might it lie in appealing to his love of golf?
The US needs that relationship, and the US needs Queensland, and Queensland needs the US. And I mentioned before about those critical minerals, and the reason why I sat up and took notice when that deal was executed, the opportunity for Queensland is real. And if you read the agreement, there's checkpoints in months rather than years and decades. And I do believe we're in the the box seat for it, and I'll continue to bang the door down. But in many cases, the US are sourcing their minerals from locations that may not be as stable as Queensland. And when you're talking about minerals that might be used for night vision goggles or hard-facing for military equipment, it's big business, but it's also, in terms of security, it's very important. I think look, relationships are always such that you'll have disagreements. That's always the way. But overwhelmingly, I think the Quad will stand the test of time. And I think long-term, if India is due to host the next Leaders Summit, but I'd like to see within the next couple of years Queensland to host it. I think, we hosted G20 a little over a decade ago. I think this is more significant because of the importance of the relationship between those four. And I think people will see, and they'll live and see real benefits from it.
Thank you. Just on the 4 critical minerals projects that you're taking to the US to pitch for sort of support funding, you said you wanted some federal funding too from the Prime Minister. How has he responded to your request so far?
Very well. And I think there's an opportunity. And just bear in mind that that money has already been apportioned by both jurisdictions, and it's got to get out the door. And I have a view that Queensland is better placed than anywhere else. Those projects are the first 4. We've got a couple that already got over the line as part of this. There's been some financing of a couple of major projects through the Exim Bank in the US, which is really important for us. But they're the first 4. I just didn't want to be too greedy on the first ask, but we'll come back for more.
All right, Josh Martin from 7 News.
Premier, as a fellow Queenslander, welcome to Canberra, and smart choice making your speech in February and not the depths of winter. You famously have a good relationship with the Prime Minister, cannoli diplomacy, some have called it. Are you hoping to use Big Mac diplomacy to meet with Donald Trump in your upcoming Washington DC trip? And is Kevin Rudd helping you organise that trip?
Yeah, I've met with the ambassador a couple of times. He's always looking for an excuse to come back to Queensland. Why wouldn't he? So in his remaining couple of months, of course, we'll use that relationship very much so. Look, I think what we are putting forward makes a lot of sense. It certainly makes sense for us. There's golden opportunities here. There's generation of economic opportunities for every part of Queensland. The benefits for us economically as a state, the royalties that will flow, that's all big business. But I genuinely think it is a two-way street. And the reason why the deal was signed and the reason why it's so imperative is the US really need it. I mentioned before about some of those minerals. In some cases, the US is getting up to 90% of these individual minerals from one jurisdiction. Now, you wouldn't do that in any industry, let alone when you're talking about geopolitical instability and relationships that can fracture. We play a key part in that. We've got an abundance of it, and we're a good, stable partner. I see this as the next wave for Queensland's economy.
Thank you.
Naveen Razik from SBS is next. Just Premier, we have just gone over 1:30. Are you happy to answer a few more questions because you've got more journalists? Great, excellent. Go for it, Naveen.
Naveen from SBS, another Queenslander as well.
3 in a row.
Yes, we're everywhere here, infesting the place.
Good. I'm home.
I spent the morning reading through some of the public submissions to your hate speech and gun reform bill, including from religious organisations, including Muslims and Catholics, who do support action on anti-Semitism but have raised concerns about the impacts on religious expression. We've even had some conservative groups like the IPA arguing that the laws that you've proposed could have even restricted arguments made by the No campaign against The Voice, which of course was supported by a majority of Queenslanders. Now, when those same groups made those arguments here in Canberra, the federal government did move to change the bill. So are you open to making some amendments, in particular tightening some of those controls around the hate speech, in particular requiring an incitement to violence or hatred rather than offence? And are you also prepared to consult and go out to Muslim communities who fear that some of their protest is being targeted here?
They are tight, and the reason why they will stand up and the reason why the committee process will show this, and we are taking it to the committee, is it was very specific against a very specific attack. And what happened in Canberra and why you saw the chaotic scenes is because that wasn't the case. It was too broad. And on the back of it, quite rightly, people stood up and drew a line as to what would happen if it was that broad. We didn't make that mistake. And I think as people go through, they will see that those arguments don't hold water and that it's tight. And you mentioned about the Muslim community. Well, one of the things is about about making sure that there is greater penalties for people who want to, for example, attack a place of worship. Now, no one will begrudge any faith being able to go to a place of worship and being able to do it safely. So if you read the legislation, it's very tight, it's very specific, and it will stand the test of time.
Have you consulted with some of those Muslim groups about some of the phrases that you would like to ban as well, because they have taken issue with some of those particular moves too?
Well, again, very tight. There's only 2 phrases that we put in there deliberately, and we didn't want to do more broadly. We put those 2 phrases that were the ones that were most insightful towards hatred, and we wanted to deal with that anti-Semitism. And by not acting some time ago, that allowed those words to become violence, the violence to become what we saw on the shores of Bondi. And so very specifically, we're very specific. But in terms of consultation, when this happened prior to Christmas, there was a heck of a lot of people saying, you've got to get laws in before Christmas, and it's never been my style to rush at things at 100 miles an hour, but I'll always deal with things in a calm and a methodical way. So I asked the Police Minister to look into guns, and I asked the Attorney General to look into the anti-Semitism, and overwhelmingly they were able to bring forward legislation that didn't make the same mistakes that we saw here, and that will be able to stand the test of time. And that was a feature of what we did. Now, I still wanted it to go to committee. We've gone for a shortened process, but I do want those people to be able to have a say. So we've found the right balance.
Thanks, Premier.
Our next question is Dana Daniel from the Canberra Times.
Thank you, Premier. Dana Daniel from the Canberra Times. I'm not from Queensland.
Oh. Would you like to be? we have passports here today.
Good retirement plan. So your predecessor ruffled a few feathers by describing Canberra as an awful place while advocating for the Australian Institute of Sport to move up to Brisbane. Do you think Canberra's an awful place? And separately, and separately to that, will you support the changes that Andrew Barr is pursuing to the way that the ABS calculates the population estimates, which have left the ACT with, he would argue, not enough GST?
Well, I don't describe anywhere in the country as an awful place. I think we should celebrate the nation that we have. It's a pretty great place. Everywhere is a pretty great place. Queensland's just a little more great, but everywhere's a great place. In terms of the GST, I'm not so sure it's the population that's the issue. It's more the way that the GST's been calculated, and it has, in my mind, left us short. Now, you would expect me to say that, but if you have a look at the last round, we're the only state that when the population and distance factors are put in, Queensland's the only state that went backwards. And we went backwards not just in a percentage, we went backwards in real terms. Now, my style is always to be very constructive, and on the back of it, we've done pretty well. We signed what I think is the best education deal in the nation, and we did well out of that Bruce Highway funding. But we've been stitched up pretty badly on GST. We have, and the Treasurer has mounted a very good case to the Federal Treasurer, who's a Queenslander, that we didn't do well in that last round. And I'm not here to make this an issue west versus east. Far from it. I'm here to just say that the pie it has not been reflective of our pressures, and we'll make that a big issue front and centre. It's really important for us. We went backwards to the tune of several billion at the worst possible time.
Western Australia is arguably your biggest strategic competitor, and WA got a $6 billion top-up.
You're not from there, are you?
I am from Western Australia.
I'm well aware
but I'm asking if you think that's fair in the scheme of things.
Look, WA contribute a lot to our economy. They do, and it's in many cases it's often been, as the 2 mining states, it's been us against everybody else. So I'm not here today to make Roger's life difficult. Far from it, right? He's got a boat to row as well, but. You guys have all got access to the budget papers. Have a look. We weren't the beneficiary of that last carve-up. It was really bad, and it was very good for the West. And I'm not begrudging anyone. We should all be able to mount a good, coherent case. But we did poorly out of that, and we were very, very forceful in it, maintaining respect but being very forceful. We'll be dialing that up next time. And it won't be so respectful. It would be pretty aggressive if we got done over again, because it was a really big whack for us.
The gloves will come off.
Well, in a Queensland kind of a way.
All right, our next question is Michael de Percy from Spectator Australia.
Thank you, Jane. Premier, thank you for your address. I'm not really a Queenslander, but both my grandmothers actually live in far north Queensland. They're both in their 90s, and both are victims of youth crime 5 times since 2022, including 2 instances last year. Now, your reforms are showing that the rate of crime is decreasing, but reports from Mareeba, where one of my grandmothers lives, tells of children throwing rocks and smashing a retiree's windows while taunting her that the police will do nothing because they're minors, so under 10. Now, this woman is also a victim of multiple times of youth crime. My question is, can you protect vulnerable elderly people from the brazen criminal actions of children, and how can you hold these children to account?
There's always going to be crime. Our mission is to make sure there's less crime. And you mentioned Mareeba. I'll be there within the next 48 hours. There's been a real, the far north has had some real challenges. And this all started when the laws were weakened in 2015. And on the back of that, you had a surge of young people who just didn't have consequences for actions. At the same time, the investment in early intervention and rehabilitation wasn't prioritised, so you had the worst of both worlds. And we're living through that now at the moment. Now, one crime is always one too many, but there will always be an element. Our role is to try to get it down. And the way we're doing that is to make sure that every change we make to the laws are to strengthen it. We are filling the police vacancies that have been there. So just to give you in round numbers, over the last 4 years, over the last 4-year term, the increase in police was to the tune of about 170 additional officers in that 4 years. We added about 500 in the first 12 months. Now, the reason why is we've got a good pipeline coming through, but the attrition rate is starting to improve as well because police are feeling a bit more empowered and willing to stay. But we've got a long way to go. And when I used the figures before, 193% increase in victims, a reduction of 7.3%, we're not popping the champagne cork, so I can tell you. And there are pockets where people are justifiably continuing to speak up. You mentioned about the age. The age of criminal responsibility is 10. There's a big push to lift that. There's been discussions at councils of attorneys general. We're not in favour of that. We do believe that there has to be consequences for actions, but equally there has to be investment in that front-end social side as well. And I think we're doing it okay. Got a long way to go.
Is legislation enough? Is this systemic?
Legislation will never be enough. You're never going to be able to arrest your way out of it, which is why we are investing in other things like early intervention and rehabilitation. But I'll never walk away from the importance of those laws, because the laws send a message that there's consequence for bad behaviour. If you don't do that, you will never be able to turn. There's an element of people around who will only respond to those laws. Equally, there's people, if you can get in early and turn them around, the cost of detaining a child and the social breakdown of that is it should be viewed as something that you can take that money and be able to invest to try and get them there in the first place. But for those who aren't willing to, there has to be that consequence. Otherwise, one without the other will never be effective.
Thank you.
All right, Premier, thank you so much for your address today. Please accept our gift of membership to the club for next time you're back in Canberra, and please join me in thanking the Premier for his address.